is the 77 WABC minicast.
Ron Johnson is, in my opinion, one of our great senators from the state of Wisconsin. I've loved him ever since the RNC. But Ron runs the risk of pissing off my good friend. Because before, Ronnie, we get to the DHS funding and Iran and the Hormuz Strait and all that stuff, I saw you yesterday talking about Brendan Carr and the FCC chair and about how you are not for taking licenses away from certain broadcasters. Like for me, for example, I think The View should be taken off the air. I know President Trump agrees. But you don't. You're all about the First Amendment. So, and you said it on Fox, which happens to be Trump's favorite network. But you're going to double down on that this morning, I'd imagine. Yes, Ron?
Well, good morning. Well, they sprung that question on me. And, you know, in general, I'm an absolute defender of the First Amendment and a free press. Now, when you have broadcast license, and those are granted by the government, there's a certain responsibility to reporting the truth, or at least correcting the record when you're not reporting the truth. Again, I don't know all the specifics. Again, I had no idea, you know, what Brendan Carr was complaining to the networks about. So I've got an open mind on it. But again, when you spring a question on somebody, I'm going to naturally go toward defending the First Amendment, defending constitutional rights, defending a free press. As much as I know, the corporate media is highly biased. But because we have free press, we've got talk radio like your show and other things as well. So I'd much rather have the open debate and a free press as opposed to I'm not a fan of government. And no matter who wields government, I'm not a fan of federal government stepping in and potentially threatening First Amendment rights.
Hard to argue any of that. I'm just kidding around with you. I was like, listen, nobody pushes that First Amendment more than me, Ron. I go right to that cliff, and I've fallen over the cliff a couple of times. I think I've been fired as much as Stern and Imus combined. So I get all that, and I can't stand The View, and I can't stand a lot of these lefty shows and on television, you know, networks like CNN and MSDN, they're disgraceful. They are disgraceful operations who wake up every single day lying. There are no facts. They just lie. No matter what they do, they find a way to besmirch the President of the United States. Like we always say, if he found a cure for cancer, they'd complain he's putting oncologists out of work. So I have no patience for that, no stomach for that. But you're right. In the end, if they're going to let me talk about Mamdani the way I do, then how can I stop them from talking about President Trump?
Precisely. Again, the only thing you have to throw in that mix is they are operating under this. They get the free broadcast frequencies, right, which is an incredibly valuable thing that's granted to them by the government. And so they have a certain responsibility to reporting the truth and correcting the record that, for example, cable operators don't. I mean, you're paying for, of course, talk radios also get granted licenses. So, again, when you do business with the government, when you're getting something from the government, you have a responsibility to the public. That needs to be a balance between that and your First Amendment rights.
One more on this. Why do you think they sprung that question on you? Maybe you've talked about the First Amendment before. You're a very reasonable, sensible guy, Ron Johnson. Why do you think they sprung that on you?
I have no idea. It came out of right field, because what I really went on that show to talk about was the Save America Act and try and explain the whole issue of the cloture vote, the filibuster, the talking filibuster, because that is, people do not understand what we're talking about here. And I don't think a lot of my colleagues really understand what's at stake.
Well, you're right. And I read this in the New York Post today. Senator Ron Johnson demands filibuster test vote to get Dems on the record. I played something last week. It was Chuck Schumer speaking on the Senate floor, much younger, handsome Chuck Schumer, going on and on about the importance of ID and how we show our ID for everything. This is 20 plus years ago, okay? And he, of course, is maybe the loudest against it. He's very racist in his negativity towards Save America. He basically claims that black people are either too stupid or they're criminals, so you can't count on them to get their own ID, which is really grotesque. In fact, that's the whole Democrat base here. Basically says that black people can't do it because they're not capable. And they call us racist, which is remarkable. So, like I said, look, whether you get a library book, whether you hop on an airplane, you want to buy a can of beer, You got to show ID. Why wouldn't you show ID to vote for the president of the United States? How ridiculous, honestly, is their side? And while you're at it, explain about the filibuster. Scott Pressler was on this show a couple of weeks ago. He said, let's blow the damn thing up. What is that? What do you mean by that? How does that work?
So during the first 100 years of our nation, the Senate had unlimited debate. They couldn't bring debate to a close, so they devised something called the cloture vote, where if enough of them voted to end debate, they could actually do it. And so then they set that as 2/3. That was watered down, reduced to 3/5, 60 votes during the, I think, 1970s. Okay, so again, it made sense. You could never bring debate to a close. All of a sudden, you had a cloture vote where you could debate, end debate, and then proceed to final passage. Well, what's happened over the years is that cloture vote is now used to eliminate debate. It's just like, oh, here's a piece of legislation. We don't like it. You don't need to debate it. And so the talking filibuster would not force a cloture vote. It would force the other side to talk. But the problem with that is that there used to be a two-speech rule. But in 1986, Robert Byrd, with 90 votes in the Senate, basically eliminated a bunch of things that otherwise would have been considered a speech. In other words, offering an amendment. So now you'd actually have to make formal speeches, and offering amendments does not count toward the two-speech rule. So there's really no way to bring debate to an end, once again, other than with the cloture vote. Now, the other thing you need to – so, again, that's why the talking filibuster, it's the chances of us bringing the vote for Save America Act to a vote with just a 50-vote threshold is virtually nil, because Democrats, the Save America Act, election security is existential to their plans of a one-party nation, so they'll keep offering an infinite number of amendments.
Right, because again, just to kind of reiterate for people that are a little confused, the reason why Democrats don't want the Save America Act is because the majority, overwhelming majority, maybe all of the people that don't show IDs vote Democrat. In fact, let me remind folks that Kamala Harris only won 7 states when Trump kicked her ass last time around. Those were the 7 states that did not require ID. They cheat, Ron, bottom line.
It's why they flooded millions of people in here, sent them to sanctuary cities and states where they plump up the census count, get more members of Congress, but also then allow them to vote. They resist any effort to provide election security. They don't care that your legitimate vote might be canceled by one of their fraudulent votes, helping them get elected. So that's really what's at stake here. But the issue is, how can we bring that to a vote? There was never a super majority vote prior to the cloture vote, and in every state there's not a super majority required to pass all legislation. There are super majorities required to pass tax increases. So again, there are those of us, and here's the split in the Senate, in the Republican Senate. We all know how the filibuster, the cloture vote, has prevented awful piece of Democrat legislation from being passed. We understand that, okay? But the reality is Democrats are going to end the filibuster as soon as they can. The split in our conference is, do you believe Democrats are going to end the filibuster or not? I happen to believe they will, and so I'm willing to beat them to the punch so we can pass some good piece of legislation for the benefit of the American public. I've got a lot of Republican colleagues that are hoping beyond hope. Oh, no, Democrats, they're not going to end this filibuster. They will, and that's really the debate going on in the Senate conference right now. Do you believe the Democrats are going to do it or not? If you believe they are, those of us who believe they are want to just end the filibuster. So we go to a majority vote in the Senate to pass legislation. That's probably the only way the Save America Act is going to get passed. I mean, you don't hear a lot of my colleagues talk about that because they dance around the issue. But if you want to get Save America Act passed, we need to end the cloture vote. We have to go to just a majority vote. Now, again, it's going to ping pong back and forth. There's no doubt about it. But that's what happens in most states. I don't think it's going to be a calamity because the Senate as an institution is already horribly broken. Take a look at what's happening around DHS funding.
Yeah, I want to go to that because, you keep saying how your colleagues answer on the issues, and you've been critical of your colleagues, Republicans in the House and the Senate, when it comes to the DHS funding, too. I mean, I got to go to Florida on Thursday night to see my mom, my cousin. They're both older. And I'm already really nervous about how long I'll be at the airport on Thursday, if I'll even get back to New York on Monday. I'm nervous about all this, but above and beyond my ridiculousness are these poor TSA guys. They're not getting paid. According to Sean Duffy yesterday, over 300 quit. So these morons, these Democrat morons who are doing all this because of ICE, which is funded for the next 3 years, they're destroying all these lives. TSA, Coast Guard, FEMA, goes on and on. But you have said that you believe that the Republican strategy has not been very good during this DHS mess. Or am I putting words in your mouth?
No, I mean, it was a strategic blunder not to include DHS funding with funding that on programs that Democrats wanted. I mean, that's how you get this stuff passed. Democrats want all kinds of social type of spending. Republicans want to fund defense and fund Homeland Security. So you bundle those together. You don't let Democrats pass their funding without passing our funding. So that was a strategic blunder. It was also a huge strategic blunder. Twice we had voted in the Republican Senate. All 53 Republicans voted for the Shutdown Fairness Act. I had President Trump absolutely guarantee me that he would make sure that that would be passed and signed into law, and I have the assurance of the Speaker and the leader to attach the Shutdown Fairness Act to any must-pass piece of legislation that would come from the House over the Senate. It's the only way it would pass, and then they didn't do it. They sent over a couple of different appropriation bills. They didn't pass Shutdown Fairness Act. By the way, all that does is just pay people on time.
Right.
We wouldn't have this dislocation right now, this disruption, because TSA agents would be being paid even though the department's not funded. That's what the Shutdown Fairness Act would have done, but we didn't do it because House appropriators didn't like it. And here's the dirty secret, Sid, that the uniparty appropriators, they like shutdowns. It creates the leverage, the pressure for them to pass appropriation bills that we can't afford. But again, that's the dirty little secret. We have the uniparty appropriators, and they have no problem with shutdowns, which is why they reject my Eliminate Shutdown Act, which is why they reject the Shutdown Fairness Act. They want the leverage. It's sick. It's disgusting, and I'm calling them out.